before Boaz ever stepped into the quiet fields of Bethlehem, before he ever met Ruth on that fateful day, before their story became one of the most unexpected turning points in the entire Bible, there was a shadow behind his name that almost no one ever talks about. Because to understand Boaz, you must go centuries back into a scandal, a curse, and a prophecy that shaped his bloodline long before he was born. Boaz was not just a wealthy landowner. He was not simply a good man or a kind redeemer. No, Boaz was the final link in a chain that began with one of the darkest stories in Genesis, the sin of Judah and Tamar. According to Scripture, Boaz descended from Perez, the son conceived through a union that should never have happened. Judah denied Tamar justice. Tamar disguised herself, and the entire tribe of Judah was marked by a generational stain that seemed impossible to erase. That stain was passed down to Perez, then to Hezron, then through generations of men struggling to rise above the curse placed upon their family. And from that line came Boaz, a man placed exactly where prophecy demanded him to be. But who was he really? The Bible hints, but doesn't fully explain. His name, Boaz, means "in him is strength," but Jewish tradition goes even further. According to ancient Midrash, Boaz was not born into effortless prosperity. His family barely survived the famine that drove Elimelech and Naomi to Moab. The house of Judah was collapsing. Bethlehem was empty. The fields were dry. Everything that seemed stable in Israel had fallen apart. And yet, Boaz somehow still stood. He became one of the elders at the gate, a man of honor during a generation that did what was right in its own eyes. But here is the mystery. Why did God choose him of all people to begin the line of David and ultimately the Messiah? This is where the hidden story begins. According to tradition, Boaz was not a young man. Some sources say he was nearly 80 when Ruth entered his life. He had lived long enough to see Israel fall into corruption. He had seen men abandon their families, their faith, and their heritage, and yet he remained righteous, standing firm even when everyone around him wavered. There was a reason he was respected in Bethlehem. There was a reason people trusted him, and there was a reason God placed him at the center of one of the most important redemptive acts in human history. Because Boaz was not just the son of a complicated lineage, he was the answer to it. Every generation before him carried the weight of the Tamar incident, the shame, the brokenness, the unresolved sin. But Boaz, he was the one chosen to redeem not only Ruth, but the entire legacy of Judah itself. God had been building toward this moment for hundreds of years, and here is the even deeper mystery. Boaz himself knew the cost of redemption. He understood the law of the kinsman redeemer, the price that must be paid, the risks a man must take to protect the vulnerable. He had seen how easily families could fall apart, and perhaps most importantly, he understood the heart of God in a way few men of his era did. While the rest of Israel saw Moabites as cursed outsiders, Boaz saw something different, that sometimes the people God chooses come from the most unexpected places. But his story becomes even more mysterious when you look at his mother. Because, according to many biblical scholars, Boaz was the son of Rahab, the former prostitute from Jericho, who helped the spies of Israel. If this is true, then Boaz was the child of a redeemed outsider, raised by a woman who knew firsthand what God's mercy could do. He understood redemption not as a legal obligation, but as a personal story. Think about that. Boaz was shaped by a lineage scarred by sin, a mother redeemed by faith, a tribe marked for kingship, and a prophecy waiting centuries to be fulfilled. He was the collision point of everything God had been weaving behind the scenes. And when the famine ended, when Naomi returned home, empty, when Ruth followed behind her with nothing but loyalty and courage, Boaz stepped onto the stage exactly when the story needed him most. He wasn't just a man in a field. He wasn't just a wealthy landowner or a polite gentleman. He was the descendant of scandal, the son of redemption, the guardian of prophecy, and the man assigned to repair what Judah broke centuries earlier. This, the hidden foundation of his life, is what makes the story of Boaz far more mysterious than the simple love story most people think it is. Because before he ever redeemed Ruth, God had already been preparing Boaz to redeem a legacy. When the weeks of hard labor finally drew to an end and the harvest approached its completion, a stillness settled inside Naomi's home, a stillness heavy with both anxiety and hope. She sensed that the threads of destiny had begun weaving around Ruth and Boaz in ways no human eye could ignore. And Naomi knew, if she remained passive, the moment God had opened would pass them by. Some doors do not stay open forever. So she called Ruth closer to the warm glow of the oil lamp. The flickering light carved soft patterns across Naomi's worn but steadfast face. She studied Ruth for a long moment, as if weighing the weight of ancient laws and divine timing, before she finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, yet firm, the voice of someone who has lived enough life to recognize when God is moving. "My daughter," she said, "I must find security for you, a place where you will be protected." Then Naomi revealed her plan. That very night, Boaz would be on the threshing floor, guarding his grain as wealthy landowners often did at the end of the harvest. Men would eat, drink, celebrate the season's completion, and then sleep near the piles of barley to protect them from thieves. But Naomi's plan was far deeper than a simple meeting. It was rooted in an ancient law, the sacred mechanism of redemption. She explained that Boaz was a goel, a kinsman redeemer, someone with the authority to restore a family's future by marrying the widow of a deceased relative. And the moment had come for Ruth to step into this divine structure. "Wash yourself," Naomi instructed. "Anoint yourself and put on your best garment. Go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to Boaz until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, mark the place where he sleeps. Go there, uncover the edge of his blanket, and lie at his feet." To a modern mind, the act may seem strange, but in the language of ancient Israel, it carried deep meaning. A woman uncovering the corner of a man's covering and lying at his feet was a symbolic request for protection, a humble plea for the man to take her under his wing. It was not seduction. It was a sacred gesture tied to law, honor, and covenant. Ruth listened without protest, without fear, with the calm resolve of someone who trusts God more than her own understanding. "I will do everything you say," she answered, and she meant it. Her heart was steady, even though the path ahead was shadowed with uncertainty. As the sun set over Bethlehem, its golden light faded into violet dusk before sinking into deep blue night. The air warmed and thickened with the smell of barley, oil, and the smoke of evening fires. The threshing floor buzzed with laughter, work songs, and the weary satisfaction of a harvest well finished. Boaz, after eating and drinking, lay down beside his heaps of grain. His breathing softened, his body sank into rest, and soon the entire threshing floor grew quiet, Workers drifted to sleep in their corners, and silence settled over the night like a soft, dark canopy. Only the distant chirping of insects and the low crackle of dying embers disturbed the stillness. And into that silence, like a shadow woven from moonlight itself, Ruth moved. Her steps were soft. Her figure nearly dissolved into the darkness. Her heart beat quickly, yet her expression was steady. She had washed, anointed herself, put on her best cloak, not to beautify herself, but to show dignity, readiness, and respect for the ancient covenant she was about to invoke. She found the place where Boaz lay. She knelt, gently lifted the edge of his blanket, and lay down at his feet. It was an act of humility, an act of trust, a silent prayer in the shape of a gesture. She, a Moabite, a widow, a foreigner, was placing her future fully into God's hands. Time passed, long or short, no one could say. The night wrapped around them like a veil, thick and still. Suddenly, Boaz stirred. Something startled him. He shifted, reached forward, and sensed a presence at his feet. He sat up quickly, peering through the shadows. His breath caught. "Who are you?" he asked. And Ruth's voice, calm and clear in the darkness, answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wing over me, for you are a kinsman redeemer." She was asking him, with complete respect, to fulfill the ancient role of redemption. This was not manipulation, not temptation. It was covenant. Boaz's heart softened the moment he heard her. Ruth's courage and purity were unmistakable. "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter," he said. "You have shown more kindness now than before, because you did not chase after young men, whether rich or poor. Do not be afraid. I will do for you all you ask." But the path was not without challenge. Boaz explained that there was another man, a closer relative, with the first right to redeem Ruth. He could not break the divine order, but he vowed with solemn strength, "If he refuses, I will redeem you." Then, in a symbolic act of blessing, he gathered a generous amount of barley and placed it on Ruth's cloak. It was a silent promise of future provision, a gesture that said more than any words could. Before dawn, he sent her home quietly to avoid misunderstanding or gossip. And as Ruth walked away through the dim light of early morning, the cool breeze rising over the threshing floor felt like a sign, gentle, invisible, divine, that God Himself was guiding each step toward a destiny no one could yet see. As the night deepened over Bethlehem and the fields grew quiet beneath the blanket of starlight, the story of Boaz was moving toward the moment that would define the destiny not only of Ruth, but of Israel itself. Yet to understand the depth of what was about to unfold, one must look beneath the surface of the simple events described in Scripture. Hidden beneath these moments is a web of ancient customs, lost meanings, and divine orchestration that scholars and sages have sought to comprehend for generations. After the long day in the fields, Boaz returned to his home, yet his thoughts did not settle. The image of Ruth gleaning behind the reapers stayed with him. Her humility, her determination, her quiet devotion to Naomi, it was unlike anything he had seen among the daughters of Judah. She was a foreigner, yes, but Boaz could feel the ancient words of the Torah stirring in his heart. "Do not despise the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." But this story goes deeper, for Boaz was no ordinary man. He was a judge, a leader, a descendant of Rahab, herself a foreigner, brought under the wings of Israel. The divine irony was breathtaking. Rahab the Canaanite, mother of the line that would one day welcome Ruth the Moabite. Outsiders being woven into the very lineage that would eventually produce King David, and far into the future, the Messiah himself. And so, after Ruth returned to Naomi with the grain Boaz had generously given, Naomi understood immediately that the hand of the Lord was guiding their path. She knew the ancient law of the Goel, the kinsman redeemer, a man who could reclaim the land of the deceased, restore the family's inheritance, and offer protection to a widow. This was more than romance. This was covenant, justice, and divine mercy unfolding through the traditions of Israel. The fields of Bethlehem grew golden as the days passed. The barley harvest turned into the wheat harvest, marking the passage of time. Ruth continued working in Boaz's fields, and each day Boaz observed more of her character. She was steadfast, gentle, but strong in spirit, qualities that echoed the women of Israel's most sacred stories. But Boaz also wrestled with something deeper. The law required that a closer kinsman, a man of their clan, had the first right to redeem Naomi's family. Boaz could not break the law or overlook it, even though his heart was steadily drawn toward Ruth. This tension between duty and desire, between divine law and divine calling, forms the hidden heartbeat of Boaz's story. The scripture gives only glimpses of his inner struggle, but every scholar of ancient Israel knows what it meant to be a shofet, a judge. Boaz was bound to righteousness, and righteousness requires order. He could not simply take Ruth as his wife, no matter how worthy she was, unless the nearer relative relinquished his right. Naomi, wise in the customs of her people, saw that the window of redemption was narrow. If Ruth remained a widow too long, her chance at securing a future would slip away. And so Naomi explained to her the ancient tradition of approaching the kinsman redeemer at the threshing floor, a place of winnowing where the grain is separated from the chaff, and symbolically where truth is separated from uncertainty. This is one of the most misunderstood moments in the entire book of Ruth. Many modern readers fail to grasp the symbolic, covenantal purity of the act. Ruth would not seduce Boaz. She would present herself under the covering of his cloak, the symbolic request, "Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." This was not flirtation. This was not impropriety. This was a legal declaration, a covenantal appeal grounded in ancient law and divine command, and Boaz, honorable, steady, righteous, would respond not with desire, but with integrity. But this moment was not yet here. The night of the threshing floor was approaching, but so were the trials that would test Boaz's faith, his courage, and his commitment to righteousness. For behind the scenes, whispers ran through Bethlehem. Some questioned the presence of a Moabite woman. Others wondered whether Boaz, wealthy and respected, would truly risk his reputation by binding himself to a foreign widow. The law allowed it, but public opinion could be harsh. Yet the Lord was weaving a tapestry far larger than the judgments of men. What seemed like a small domestic matter in a small town would one day influence the destiny of nations. As the harvest reached its peak, the workers prepared for the threshing, one of the most important moments in the agricultural year. The threshing floor was a circular, elevated place where the evening breezes helped separate grain from chaff. Men often slept beside the grain to protect it from thieves. It was here, under the starlit sky, that the drama of redemption would unfold. Boaz watched over his workers, his heart both expectant and uneasy. He sensed something approaching, a turn in the story. though he could not have guessed how divine the moment would become. He thought of Naomi, widowed and aging. He thought of Ruth, loyal and brave. He thought of his own responsibility and the mysterious stirring in his spirit that felt like destiny, calling him by name. The stage was set, the harvest complete, the law poised to be fulfilled. The night of the threshing floor was drawing near, and with it, the revelation of the hidden story of Boaz. When dawn rose over Bethlehem, the entire town seemed to hold its breath. The harvest had ended, the threshing floor had quieted, and yet the greatest turning point in Ruth's life was still ahead. Boaz walked with steady purpose toward the city gate, an ancient place where judgments were made, where disputes were settled, and where destinies were shaped through words spoken before witnesses. The previous night had been filled with meaning, yet the law still had its requirements. Ruth's plea on the threshing floor had awakened a path that had to be completed properly, before elders, before the community, and before God himself. The city gate stood like a fortress of stone and timber, worn by years of sun, wind, and countless gatherings. Merchants were arranging their goods as early travelers entered. Shepherds guided flocks past the walls. Amid this morning movement, Boaz took his place at the gate not as a warrior or judge, but as a man ready to fulfill a sacred duty. He waited for the nearer kinsman, the man who had the first right to redeem Naomi's land and Ruth's future. This moment would decide everything. The nearer kinsman soon approached, unaware of the significance of the meeting. Boaz called him forward and gathered 10 elders, respected men whose presence transformed the open roadway into an official courtroom. Dust swirled subtly in the cool air as people paused to observe. Some recognized Boaz's solemn expression. Others noticed Naomi watching from a distance, her hope hidden but powerful. Boaz presented the matter with clarity. Naomi was selling her land, and according to the law, the closest relative had the right to redeem it. At first, the man answered quickly, agreeing to buy the land. The crowd murmured quietly. It seemed as though Ruth's path might slip away into the hands of another. But Boaz continued, stating the full weight of the responsibility. Whoever redeemed the land must also take Ruth the Moabite as wife, raising offspring in the name of her late husband, preserving the family line. This changed everything. Responsibility, cost, legacy. The nearer kinsman hesitated. The law required commitment, not convenience. After a moment, he stepped back and refused, declaring that taking Ruth would endanger what belonged to him. His decision echoed through the gathered crowd. It was a turning point, not only for Ruth, but for the entire lineage connected to her. Then came the act that sealed destiny. Before all witnesses, the nearer kinsman removed his sandal, handing it to Boaz, an ancient symbol marking the transfer of redemption rights. The gesture was simple, but its meaning was immense. The crowd leaned closer, watching history shift with a single action. Boaz lifted the sandal and proclaimed that he was redeeming Naomi's land and taking Ruth as his wife, restoring the line of Elimelech and honoring the legacy lost in Moab. The elders responded with blessings-rich, ancient words spoken with gravity. They invoked the memory of Rachel and Leah, women who built the house of Israel. They prayed that Ruth, once a foreigner, would become like them, that her life would contribute to the future strength of the nation. The people echoed the blessing, their voices carrying across the stone walls and into the fields beyond. It was as though heaven itself approved. Boaz's acceptance of Ruth was not merely a personal decision. It was a spiritual union of cultures, families, and destinies. Ruth, once a widow gleaning at the edges of the harvest, was being restored not through chance, but through divine orchestration. Her loyalty to Naomi, her courage at the threshing floor, and Boaz's integrity at the gate all converged into a moment that felt larger than life. As the crowd dispersed, Naomi stepped closer, witnessing the redemption she had longed for. Her eyes reflected years of loss, now intertwined with unexpected restoration. Ruth did not stand in the center of this part of the process, yet everything revolved around her. Redemption in Israel had always required public recognition, and now her future was secured openly, honorably, and permanently. Boaz and the elders remained at the gate for a moment longer, discussing the legal details, ensuring every term was recorded through witnesses. The sun had risen fully, casting golden light over the stones. The city gate, once a place of tension and uncertainty, now felt like a sanctuary where broken stories were mended. For Ruth and Naomi, this day marked the end of wandering and the beginning of belonging. The foreign widow who had arrived in Bethlehem with nothing now carried a legacy that would change the course of history. And although no one around the city gate yet understood the magnitude of what had unfolded, the lineage of kings and ultimately the lineage of hope had begun to take shape. The gates of Bethlehem had witnessed many agreements, many broken promises, many silent bargains made under the watch of time. But this one was different. What happened on that morning did not fade into dust. It was recorded not only by the voices of the elders, but by God himself. Boaz had redeemed Ruth. He had restored Naomi. He had preserved the name of the dead. But more than that, he unknowingly stepped into a plan that would stretch far beyond his lifetime. In a small house in Bethlehem, Ruth and Boaz began a new life, not one marked by power or kingship, but by quiet faithfulness. Day after day, seasons passed. Crops were planted and harvested. Prayers were whispered at dawn. And soon, a child was born. They named him Obed. The women of the town rejoiced. They said to Naomi, "Your life has been restored. Your emptiness is filled." And Naomi, once broken, now held new life in her arms. But the world did not yet understand what this truly meant. Obed would grow up, and Obed would become the father of Jesse, and Jesse would become the father of David, the shepherd king of Israel. Yes, this foreign woman, this Moabite widow, this forgotten gleaner in the fields became part of the greatest royal line in biblical history. From her bloodline would come wisdom. From her humility, authority. From her suffering, a throne. And generations later, from that very line, in the same town of Bethlehem, another child would be born, not in a palace, not surrounded by wealth, but in a stable, wrapped in cloth, laid in a manger. That child would be called Jesus. The same city, the same lineage, the same invisible thread woven through time. Boaz did not know it. Ruth could not imagine it. Naomi never saw the full picture, yet God was writing a story much larger than any of them, and that is the hidden power of this story. It is not about kings or riches. It is about obedience when no one is watching. It is about kindness when life feels unfair. It is about faith, even in the fields of despair. Boaz did not seek glory, but God gave him a legacy that would echo through eternity. And the same principle applies even now. Your small decisions, your quiet sacrifices, your unseen loyalty, they may be shaping something far greater than you can understand. The world may never know your name, but heaven remembers. So the real question is not, who was Boaz? The real question is, who are you becoming when no one is looking? If this hidden biblical story touched you, if it made you look at your life differently, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe now to discover more forgotten stories of the Bible, like this video to support this channel. And comment below, I choose legacy over glory, because the next hidden story could be your own.